Today I will be giving some prepared remarks on the closure letter that was sent to former Principal Kurt Dennis, which has been released to several different media agencies, and then also open for questions after that, and I plan to stay so that we can get all your questions out of the way. So I'll start with my remarks and we'll go from there. Cowardice asked the question, is it safe? Expediency asked the question, is it politic? Vanity asked the question, is it popular? But conscience asked the question, is it right? And there comes a time when one must take a position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but one must take it because one's conscience tells them that it is right. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. To begin, I must emphasize the path of least resistance would definitely stay silent and avoid making waves. However, I've chosen to risk it all in the pursuit of justice for black students that were unjustly subjected to seclusion. While I recognize this could significantly affect my political future in Colorado, I'm willing to put everything on the line for our children. On August 29th, 2023, former Principal Kurt Dennis released a closure letter that he received regarding the allegations of seclusion rooms at McAuliffe International Middle School under his leadership. These allegations surfaced on August 1st, 2023, which led to Denver Public Schools, the Denver Police Department, the Colorado Department of Education, and now the Denver unit of the National Association, the NAACP, to open 4 separate investigations into these allegations. At this time, the Denver Police, Colorado Department of Education, and the Denver unit of the NAACP are still investigating, while Denver Public Schools has closed its investigation into Kurt Dennis, but is still investigating other individuals. On July 7th, these allegations were sent over to 9 News from the anonymous whistleblowers, and 9 News failed to act or alert any of the organizations investigating this matter. This ultimately delayed the investigation findings from the Denver Public Schools, and it is important to our partners in the media that receive tips like this to alert the Denver Public Schools to ensure that we can investigate any claims of wrongdoing against our children. The closure letter sent to Principal Dennis, which he shared with media outlets prior to this conference, stated the following. There's an important note. I've also released these remarks on my Medium channel, and there's a note here that says where you has been replaced with Mr. Dennis as I read this so it doesn't get confusing. During the investigation, this would now be from the Denver Public Schools to Mr. Dennis. During the course of the district's internal investigation, DPS Human Resource investigators identified 3 student complainants, 1 impacted party, and personally interviewed 3 student complainants and 24 witnesses with information relevant to the complaint. Mr. Dennis was provided multiple opportunities to participate in the investigation, but declined to do so. In the absence of an interview with Mr. Dennis, the investigators took note of his public statements made by Mr. Dennis and his attorneys, and by Mr. Dennis and his attorneys related to the above allegations. The investigators also collected and reviewed relevant documentary evidence, including but not limited to emails, McAuliffe International student rosters, IEP, behavior conference tabs, and special education meeting notes. In doing so, the investigators determined the following. The preponderance of the evidence found Mr. Dennis guilty of directing McAuliffe faculty staff to use 2 rooms located in the school, room 115 and room 121E, for the purpose of student seclusion, beginning on November 18th, 2022, and continuing through the end of the academic school year. Mr. Dennis personally placed or directed McAuliffe staff to place students in these rooms without proper supervision or accompaniment. Mr. Dennis personally placed or directed staff to place these students in a seclusion room and either locked or held the door shut, preventing student egress, and Mr. Dennis personally continued and directed staff to at least use one of the rooms, which was damaged over the course of the school year and was not safe for appropriate use or any sort of student purposes. There was insufficient evidence for the following: that Mr. Dennis treated the student complainants or impacted party differently based on the race, color, national origin as it relates to placement in both of these rooms. I want to be very clear that at no point during this investigation did any board member of the Denver Public Schools Board of Education state that the only reason students were placed into this room was because they were students of color. The legal burden of proof for racial discrimination is high, but I believe that this is an opportunity for us to talk about implicit bias and racial bias and influence on our decisions. On August 7th, board members confirmed through the initial investigation conducted by Denver Public Schools that all students that we know of are students of color. That is true to this day. All students that we know of and have identified are all students of color. On August 23rd, the Board of Education received a 33-page report from the Denver Public Schools that included witness testimony and impacted party statements. However, that document is sealed under attorney-client privilege and cannot be released by members of the Board of Education. It is my hope that if Mr. Dennis moves forward with his legal action, this document will be unsealed and the public will read the stories that have kept me up for most of this past week. It is important to note that everything that the whistleblower had alleged Mr. Dennis of doing to these students has been corroborated. When the district began this investigation, we only knew of one room used for seclusion purposes, but today, again, I can confirm that we have at least found 2 rooms used for seclusion purposes. And also that these rooms were violated administrative policy JKA and JKA-R. I can confirm that other staff members knew about the use of this room and are still being investigated. I can also confirm students were placed into the room with items that would have harmed themselves or others, which raises a question for those defending the use of this room. How can you justify seclusion as a safe alternative for students with escalated emotions while allowing them to be in an unsafe space? To the students who may have suffered, my heart aches for the pain that you have endured. Saying I'm sorry hardly feels adequate, knowing all that you were put through. But please know these words come from the deepest corners of my soul. I am haunted by the thought that we didn't catch this sooner and that we could not prevent your suffering. Yet sorrow alone cannot rewrite the past. It is action that will define our future. I want you to know that I am fiercely committed to ensuring that no one else goes through what you have experienced. Let this be a moment that we draw a line in the sand and say, enough. We will rise from this dark chapter even stronger and more unified and committed to justice. My promise to our DPS community remains this, and that is every day remaining in this tenure, I will be dedicated to rooting out injustice and ensuring safe and respectful environments for all students. This is not a time for inaction or silence. It is a time for resolve and accountability. To those who think that they can exploit the innocence of our students, know that we will find you and you will face the full force of justice. In the depths of your despair, we know that we are turning a somber page in our collective story, but it will not be our last page. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, and so we must bend it. With hands calloused from our collective labor and our spirits unbroken, we move forward not just with the spirit of hope, but with the urgency of justice, a justice that has been long deferred but will be denied no more. And at this time, I'll open it up to clarifying questions from the press. Go ahead, Nico.
Thank you for holding this for us and taking the questions. Appreciate it. The investigation, is this all at McAuliffe or is it elsewhere in the district?
Yeah, the investigation that report that was released to Mr. Dennis only pertains to McAuliffe International.
No, I'm so sorry. You mentioned that there's still an investigation ongoing among others.
Yeah.
Is that directly related to the seclusion at McAuliffe?
Correct. At this time, from my understanding, all investigations are focused on McAuliffe International School.
Auon'tai, as you so eloquently mentioned that 9 News received this email in early July, which thanks for your loyalty and watching and following 9 News. As you know, in the email it states that the person tried to bring this to the attention of the district before they emailed 9 News. Have you confirmed as to whether or not the district received correspondence from the whistleblower? And if so, why did the district not do anything about it at that time?
Thanks for the question. I do not have any confirmation that the whistleblowers did reach out to Denver Public Schools, and we have been actively looking into that, and I've asked our superintendent to continue his ongoing investigation to make sure that that is not a true statement. And so I encourage, again, people that when you do get tips, if you see something, say something, or if you hear something, say something. This investigation could have been wrapped up weeks prior to this past weekend. I think the McAuliffe community could have had some closure prior to August 24th. And I want to be very clear. This is not a war on McAuliffe International Middle School. This is not a war on educators. This is not a war on an individual. What this is us rooting out a system of oppression, which is in alignment with our end statement around equity. Holding students against their will in seclusion rooms is against district policy. All adults are well knowledgeable of district policy, and nobody is above district policy, and that is why I voted to fire Kurt Dennis this past week.
Did you think Mr. Dennis's conduct was bad enough prior to the discovery of the seclusion room that you would have voted to terminate him anyway?
I was actually planning to vote against the termination of Mr. Dennis, and the only reason was to ensure that when we are terminating an employee based off of FERPA, that practice is the same practice for every employee before Mr. Dennis. I was not in a position at the time to have received information from the district that this is the standard process. Later on did confirm that this is the process. And so on August 1st, I was actually prepared to vote against the superintendent's recommendation. But after this seclusion room, it was very clear that this individual can no longer remain a part of the Denver Public Schools community.
Mr. Dennis had said one white and one black student. How many students are you aware of in the race of the students?
Yeah, I'm still waiting for Mr. Dennis and Mr. Dennis's attorney to provide evidence to support the claims that this was a one white and one black student. What I do know, and what we've said earlier, a part of this internal investigation, is that we did know of at least 4 students that were impacted by the room, and all of them were students of color, and that statement is still true to this day.
You mentioned to your knowledge that all of the students were students of color that were placed into these seclusion rooms. With the investigation being unable to substantiate that Mr. Dennis is guilty of discrimination, what are your thoughts on those findings?
Yeah, again, it goes to the fact that nobody at one point said Mr. Dennis was going through a hallway and saying, you're coming to this room because of your race. Unfortunately, we have seen a pattern of discrimination that folks outside of the district have labeled discrimination when it comes to identifying students with affective needs and also learning differences, particularly at this school. Pam Bashelier from Advocacy Denver did a great breakdown of what those discrepancies were at our first press conference. And so those concerns still remain true. But I don't believe that, and we now have the evidence to say that Mr. Dennis was not going around McAuliffe saying, you come into this room because you're black. But unfortunately, all of the students that were placed into this room were subjected to this inhumane treatment were students of color. And so I think that this is an opportunity for us to talk about racial and implicit bias.
So, we talked with a mother of a student who had a student in the seclusion room as recently as May. This student is white. So how do you explain, you keep saying that all of the students impacted are students of color, when we have a mother who states that her student was there 2 months ago and that student was white?
Yeah, I would encourage that family to reach out to district investigators. That means the victim count just went up again.
So you're saying that your investigation is thorough, but yet this person was never contacted by investigators?
The Denver Public Schools investigation team did a thorough investigation into what they could find, and if somebody has evidence that their student was placed into that room, we still encourage them to reach out. I still encourage them to reach out, be a part of the process.
The investigation includes records of students that were placed in this room, yet that person was never contacted by investigators, by DPS? How is that a thorough investigation?
I can't go into the student records of an individual student to know if that was properly documented in their Infinite Campus tab. But I will say that, again, the victim count, if that is true, the victim count just went up. It doesn't excuse the use of this room. Even if a parent supports it, it's still against district policy. Adults know better in DPS. So if their student was truly in that room, I still encourage them, reach out, come forward, share your story. But that just means the victim count just went up to 5. Brother Jeff.
A couple of questions and maybe a follow-up later. As it relates to the investigation, did the investigation also include who knew what? For example, was the superintendent totally left out in terms of not knowing what was going on? And then also, those who were mandatory reporters, this is a crime, is taking place. Was that captured in this report? And then you said 2 seclusion rooms. Initially, I think you used the terminology of incarceration rooms.
Yep.
Are you using those synonymously, or were both of those rooms locked down from preventing the student from being able to exit?
We know of, at least through what was provided. I can only speak to what was provided to Mr. Dennis, which he released publicly. So I can only tell you that there are 24 witness statements. There are 3 student statements. Multiple parents were interviewed, and that's a part of the closure letter that was sent to Mr. Dennis. I'm not able to go into the actual 33-page report. When it comes to the seclusion incarceration, it's important to note that the district never labeled this an incarceration room. We used the words of what staff used to identify that room at McAuliffe. There was a work order that did determine that room 121E was used for student rage and incarceration. That is a work order submitted by a staff member at McAuliffe around this room. That is where the term incarceration room comes from. What I know at this time is that there is at least one door in that room that did have an external lock placed on it, and also have an external lock or locks placed on the window. I can't speak to the other room because I'm learning about the other room at the same time that you all are, and I'm appalled. But I now that we know that one room was verified and used these sorts of locks, we do know that at least in the other room, students were not permitted to exit per the closure letter. The door was held shut by adults standing in front of the door holding the door shut. So that still prevents student egress and still is against district policy. District policy calls it seclusion, and that's the formal terminology for seclusion. But the incarceration, I would say, is synonymous only, and that is only a staff identified word that we have used because that is the words of those who have been at the school, put in a work order, and said that is the purpose of this room and what it was being used
So
for.
is seclusion different from de-escalation?
Seclusion is different from de-escalation. Seclusion is the act of leaving somebody in a room alone with preventing egress or preventing an exit. That's what happened at McAuliffe. Monitored seclusion means somebody is in the room with the student at all times. We actually give guidance that we want 2 students to be in, or 2 adults to be in the room with the student. If not, there must be one person at all times. You cannot stand outside of a window and call that monitored seclusion. That is not monitored seclusion.
I had talked to a parent of a student who was in this room. That student and the parent said this room was helpful. Their description of this room is different than what's in this report. Now, that description also falls out of the window from November 18, 2022 to now. Do the investigators have any idea when this room changed?
Yeah, I can't give, personally, I don't know around when the room changed. I do know that before this room was turned into a seclusion room, it was used as a school psychologist's office. So I'm not sure if that is the same room in question. I did watch a CBS report of a parent that talked about how their student needed a de-escalation room, and he had puppies and punching bags. And so I'm still looking for the room with puppies and punching bags. I still have yet to find that personally. And so I think that would be helpful information as the investigation continues to go on into other parties. Melanie.
I think you had mentioned a while ago a total number of seclusion rooms in DPS. I'm wondering if you could repeat that, and also, like, are you looking at all into banning seclusion or even monitored seclusion in DPS?
Yeah, so there are, from my knowledge, 32 de-escalation rooms in Denver Public Schools, de-escalation/sensory rooms. I have had the opportunity to visit several of these rooms across the district, and they look totally different than what we discovered at McAuliffe. One room was, community members have said it looks like Lava Island, that there are various different de-stressing objects. There's swings. There's a punching bag. There are sensory objects in that room. And so there are 32 rooms that are identified for de-escalation purposes. And those individuals would work with our SPED department, but also the way that you pay for those rooms is through by school designated funds through bond dollars. So we usually have bond construction. As you can see, we're building a new Montbello High School. That is an example of bond, but then there's other examples of a school saying, we need X amount of money, we want to do this, and then we support them in that. And the rooms that I've seen are night and day. And so I would say that for me, as a member of the school board, I am committed to reaffirming our policy on banning seclusion. It's very clear that seclusion is banned. There's no misinterpreting or allowing or the reader to interpret their own views on seclusion. It's very clear what is permitted and what's not permitted. But what I am committed right now is that seclusion is being used across the state of Colorado. And we have teamed up with Representative Regina English from Colorado Springs to introduce a bill in the next legislative cycle to ban seclusion rooms across the state of Colorado. We know that on average, Douglas County uses these rooms 80 times a year. We know that other metro districts are using these rooms. It's wrong. Putting kids in locked rooms and preventing aggress is wrong. We need to put mental health supports, wraparound services, helping students with the adults that we have in our buildings, not locking them away in schools. They go to school to learn, not to go to prison. And so I look forward to that bill being introduced. I'll be an active champion for it as a former member of the Denver School Board, and I know that I have colleagues that are prepared to champion that as current board members that will be continuing on in the next school board.
If there are 80 in DevCo, do you know how many times it's been used in DPS in those 32 seclusion rooms?
Yeah, from my understanding and research, it was used 80 times a year, and I want to say it was in the year either 2019 or 2021. So I would just go back and fact check that.
No, I'm talking about DPS. If you
Oh.
know for DevCo, do you know for DPS?
DPS, I'm not sure of, because we shouldn't be using seclusion, period. So the number should be 0. So I'm hopeful that this is a one-off situation that we will never have to repeat again. What happened here should never happen again.
How did McAuliffe document when the room was used?
That is a part of the 33-page report that I'm not able to discuss, but I do know that there are some inconsistencies in the reporting metrics.
What was so inadequate about the McAuliffe room compared to the other rooms you saw in other schools?
Yeah, I encourage folks to also go to my Facebook page, and you'll see that I posted some of the pictures of other sensory rooms across the district and de-escalation rooms, so you can see that visual for yourself. But for me, what the clear, stark difference was, when you walked into McAuliffe, you immediately would see that it was a room behind a room, and then also you saw the holes where the lock used to be. You still saw the lock on the window. You saw the room was still not in a physical condition for any student that needed to actually be there, and it had a beanbag in the middle of the floor. And that was McAuliffe's room. What I saw, for example, at Lake Middle School was a room that was a part of the special education center that was to the side, that did not have a door that had any locks on it, did not have any windows that had any locks on it, but they had sensory objects on the wall. They had bean bags and cool down areas for their students. They had flooring that was like a padded flooring and padded walls. So if a student was punching the walls or fell to the floor, it wouldn't hurt them. And so it was just night and day of the difference. And then also something that was reassured is that there's an adult in that room at all times with the student. Knowing that we have students that have high escalation moments and we want to be able to support their needs, those educators at Lake were able to understand we got to be with our kids at all times. And that's clearly not what happened here at McAuliffe.
Just for clarity, are you saying that in some school districts in Colorado, locking a child away is acceptable, and it's just not acceptable in DPS? And then the second clarifying question is, with the locked seclusion room in McAuliffe, was that the only room available for those who had sensory needs or de-escalation needs, or did McAuliffe have another room that may have had appropriate use, or did everybody get sent to seclusion?
Yeah, so to the first part of that question around, it is legal in the state of Colorado to use seclusion purposes. It is against district policy to utilize seclusion purposes. And so that is why we're working with Representative Regina English to ban seclusion and to outlaw it in the state of Colorado. So the next individual that uses these purposes, you face criminal charges, not just on locking the child in the room, or just for locking the child in the room without having to prove was a child put in the room against their will, and how did that work with the parent communication? And no, if you put a student in a room and you lock them in the room and they're by themselves and it's against the law in the state of Colorado, you need to be held accountable. So we're working on that. I can't speak to if there is another room that was used for de-escalation purposes. What I do know is that there was this room that was identified and was used, and also room 115. So 2 rooms at McAuliffe were used for these purposes. And unfortunately, they were used inadequately, and that's why you saw members of this board, I believe, express very clearly that we're holding this individual accountable. But also, any individual, it's not just this one person. If this happens and we find it out to be in another school and another individual is doing this as well, you're going to be held accountable. You're going to face the full force of justice, and you will likely lose your job. We don't tolerate seclusion. It's against policy JKA and JKA-R. Melanie.
And so I guess for the legislation and for DPS policy, you are okay with monitoring seclusion, an adult in the room?
Yeah, if we need to have opportunities where we have students that have high escalated needs and we need to be able to pull them out to get them to refocus, and we have an adult in there with them at all times to help with that cool down phase, to help with restorative practices, to help with mental health supports, that's what Team DPS is about. We have wraparound services, right? We, on our last presentation, you saw that we're putting in tens of millions of dollars into the budget for mental health supports for this district. And so there are opportunities for us as a district to say, this is what is allowed, and we believe that we can be able to de-escalate a student in a separate room with an adult in the room at all times. But when you just lock a student away like they're incarcerated or that like they should be at the Gilliam, that's not who we are, and that's against district policy. And I hope that we are able to learn from that mistake. Hold on, in the back.
Recommendation of 2 adults in a room, would schools agree that they feel like they have the staffing to do that, or is that a challenge right now?
Well, there's a recommendation for 2, required for 1, and so I would say that all of our schools across the country are going through staffing shortages. DPS is going through the same staffing shortages that other districts across the country are going through. However, I would say that what makes us a little bit unique is the amount of money that we are dedicating to having extra paraprofessionals, extra restorative practitioners, extra mental health supports. We've learned after the tragedy at East High School, we have to do so much more around the issue of mental health. And right now, this is an opportunity for us as a district, in my opinion, and as a board, to set some very clear vision for what this looks like for all schools, because it shouldn't be that there are only 32 de-escalation rooms across the district. Every school is going to have a child that has a bad day. And we need to be able to support all of our schools to have de-escalation centers and rooms that aren't used in punitive purposes but are used in restorative purposes. I strongly believe that. As a former disciplinarian in the Denver Public Schools, I know what it means to need to pull a student out of the class and to have that one-on-one time with them, or to have another adult, and we have that two-on-one, or bringing a group of students together to do restorative justice, and that obviously doesn't work while a teacher is teaching in a classroom. So I believe that we have the staffing mechanisms to do so. It's now going to be learning from this and making sure everybody knows our policies, but also the same warning I gave to 9 News about if you see something, say, if you know something or hear something or you see something, say something, it should be to all of our educators as well. If you see this happening in your schools, you have a duty as a mandated reporter to step up and say something. And I'm grateful that we have folks that felt comfortable doing so, but I do not think that we would have known about this if the former leader of McAuliffe was not terminated. Vicente.
Hey, Auon'tai, we had understood that there would be additional school board members with you, and that seemed to have changed overnight. What changed? Why aren't there more board members with you today?
Board members can speak for themselves on why they feel that they are not coming before you and having these conversations. I, as a board member, as the vice president of the board, and as an at-large member of the board who represents 200 schools, 88,000 students, I have a responsibility to keep community informed about what we are learning. People should know more so than just following us on social media what our thoughts are, or waiting 2 weeks or 3 weeks every 3 weeks to find out what are we going to say at a board meeting. And so it is my duty as an at-large member to be here. And so I can't speak for the cancellation of other board members or the reason why they're not here.
And you did mention at the beginning that you're putting yourself, or sticking your neck out, I think is kind of, I can't remember the exact terminology, but why do something like this? Is that the reason that you just mentioned you're doing it to let people know exactly what happened with this letter?
Yeah, I believe in transparency, and I believe that this is an opportunity for us to be transparent. Again, the easy thing it is no secret that I'm leaving the Denver School Board and pursuing other political ventures. The easy thing to do would have been to vote against the recommendation of Kurt Dennis, would have been to keep my head down and pass this off to another board member and have been like, you take this so I can protect my political future. because the same district that I'm running to represent in the legislature are the same, will be the same exact parents from McAuliffe International School that live in Park Hill and Central Park in Northeast Denver. And so I have put everything on the line for these babies, because I understand what it means to have lived experience, to be locked into a room and told, you're not going to be able to get out of here until you calm down. I know what that feels like, and it would be a dereliction of my duty and my oath of office to have ignored this and to let this go unchecked, and also to have let this go out there and then just step back and be like, good luck. Community has been asking questions. I get questions about this topic every single day. And so instead of me having a one-on-one with each and every one of you all and going on next with Kyle, instead of me doing all of that, I can just have one conference and talk to you all at once. And it saves y'all time, and it saves me time. And it also gives our community one consistent message, and not saying, wait, you said this here and you said this here, and I'm trying to get everything together, and why didn't this story say the same thing? We're able to get this done at once, and I hope that in the future other board members will continue having press conferences and updating community on pressing issues.
I have a question.
I'll go Jasmine, and I'm gonna come around because she hasn't asked a question.
Just really quickly, do you have any comment on the fact that your active engagement in this investigation is a violation of school board policy?
Yeah, I'm not involved in the investigation. The investigation was conducted by independent investigators of the Denver Public Schools. No board member was involved in the investigation of Kurt Dennis or any of the individuals mentioned. I think it's disheartening that we have a school board member that is more focused on his reelection and then preserving and protecting the rights of black students that were placed into this room. And so I hope that school board member that charges those allegations against us will be able to take a look into the mirror and ask himself, is he running to represent Southeast Denver based off of what he truly believes, or is he running because he wants to solely have a title and be elected to power? I hope that that individual board member will stand up and actually call out and issue a statement saying locking black children in rooms is wrong, period.
Two things. I wanted to follow up to something you said to Vicente a minute ago about lived experience. Were you saying that you had been locked in a room as a child?
Yeah, well, when I was 12 years old, I had an encounter with the criminal justice system in Kansas, where I'm originally from, and part of Kansas law at the time was new intakes were locked in solitary confinement for 24 hours. And so when I was processed into that juvenile intake center, was placed into solitary confinement for 24 hours. And it was the worst experience of my life. It was smaller than what the room was at McAuliffe, and I had similar experiences that those students had. When I'm hearing people saying that they had to cry themselves to sleep, I know what it means to be on that, in a cold, very cold room, like a closet-like space, crying myself to sleep, hoping that I'll be able to get out. I'm grateful that that I didn't allow that situation to define me in that moment, and was able to become the youngest African American to be elected to public office in this state, and to be a testament and an example to other black boys across this district that you can have a bad day, and you're going to be able to get right back up.
I actually have a question for myself. Can you talk a little bit about oversight? State statute, from what I can tell, discusses that there should be a letter sent when a child is put in a room, a letter should go home. But is it just a matter of trusting these 32 locations that are sending out those letters and are not doing the same thing at McAuliffe? What kind of oversight is there, or what kind of oversight should there be for the use of these rooms?
Yeah, I can speak to the should there be. I would say that anytime an individual is locked into a room in Denver Public Schools, for monitored seclusion purposes, not seclusion, but monitored seclusion, because that's what's acceptable, that a parent should be notified within 24 hours, period. And so can't speak to the specifics of was that a practice happening at this school. Again, I hope that through the pending legal litigation that will come out so that you can see what documentation happened at McAuliffe, and I hope that you'll be able to get some clarity on to why parents. I'll just end there.
So there's not just a quick follow-up. My apologies. So there's no one independent of the individual school leader that is looking over the shoulders to ensure that these seclusion rooms are functioning in the way that it's designed and intended based on policy?
I would refer that to Denver Public Schools. I don't want to give you an answer that would not be truthful, so I would refer that to DPS, but I'm sure that there's some sort of oversight.
Should Mr. Dennis work with kids again?
No. Would you like me to expand on that?
Could you have elaborate if you would like?
Yeah. I think that Mr. Dennis has served in a role in Denver Public Schools and elsewhere. He's done his time with our children, and so I think this is an opportunity for him to potentially pursue another career path. But I don't think that any other district should retain Mr. Dennis moving forward. But that's my personal opinion, not an opinion representative of the board of a whole. And I will also say this, is that we have been clearly, and in my opinion, I believe it's a violation of state law. I did send an email to our general counsel expressing before the vote that I definitely felt intimidated and coerced to voting a certain way by Mr. Dennis's attorney. He threatened that any board member that voted in the affirmative for the termination would be named in the lawsuit against the district for First Amendment retaliation. I definitely reached out to our attorney and let them know via email that I was uncomfortable moving forward, but I would take the vote because it's a part of my statutory obligation as a board member. And I can't speak for other board members, but I do know that that sentiment is shared amongst others, that the comments of and threatening of naming people in the lawsuit if you don't get your way and when it comes to a vote is intimidation. And so I strongly encourage that in the future when we have these issues is don't try to persuade or intimidate your elected officials into voting a certain way, because we have to make sure that we are doing our statutory obligations and also being able to look through a lens, an unbiased lens. And so I hope that in the future we can rectify that.
You were asked if Kurt Dennis should work with children again, and it's been said that he has been hired and is working with children again. What would be your message to that student body population, community, parents, etc., if in fact that's true?
Well, I think everybody should have a second chance. Personally, I don't believe that Mr. Dennis should be working with kids again. But if somebody believes that he has the ethic and the work skill and he meets their qualifications in another district, that is up to that independent district to hire and retain whatever educators they want. But I would hope that this is a learning lesson, and I would encourage him to rethink his actions, but also truly I think that this is an opportunity for us to turn the page as a district. We've lived under this dark cloud for this entire summer. Board members came from our board members aren't paid. Well, at least some of us aren't. And so we came from our vacations, the time that we take off in July with our families, to be responsive to this moment. And I'm hoping that we are able to move this dark cloud out of the way, help the Indes zone appoint a new leader, and also be able to support those students. Again, this isn't a war on McAuliffe. I plan to visit McAuliffe before the end of my term on the Denver School Board for an official school visit, and I plan to continue to be an active member in the Park Hill community. I'm a resident of Park Hill, so this school could be a school that my child will end up going to in the next few years, and I just want us to be able to turn the page as a district.
My final question, how do you reconcile he shouldn't be working with children when everyone deserves a second chance?
Yeah, again, I personally don't believe that he should be working with kids after reading the report that I read. But again, if another district feels that he's met the qualifications to serve their students, then that is up to that district. I'm not a school board member for them. But if I was, I would not be supportive of him coming to my district. Last questions.
Do you know what is used at the other schools that do not have a de-escalation room? And are the rooms that you visited, does it run the gamut K through 12, or are most of them middle school? What do you,
Yeah, these are K through 12. I've seen high schools, middle schools, and elementary schools, charter and traditional. And I would also state that for schools that don't have those rooms can also utilize other spaces. So you don't necessarily need a de-escalation room in order to be de-escalated. You can have there's office spaces that can be utilized if you have a school psychologist or a mental health professional, like their offices are usually, I'm going to say tricked out to being calming spaces. I've been to several school social worker offices and psychologists and mental health professionals where those sensory objects are in their rooms, in their office spaces. And so I think that schools get creative and they can do whatever they need to fit the needs of their school, as long as it's in alignment with policy JKA and JKA-R.
Did the Indes zone plan do the investigation, or could there have been conflicting messages of what could be done, seeing how DPS has a set of, authority, and then you've got all these other authoritarian or whatever governing bodies. How does the INVEST zone play into that investigation? Was anything learned?
I think that would be a question for the Indes zone for them to answer. I know that our investigation superseded theirs, and so if they were doing one, I'm not sure if they are. But if all employment matters still retain to the Denver Public Schools, that's in their innovation plan, and that's in a part of district policy. And so I would reach out to Indes and ask them what steps they're going to do.
But in that thorough investigation does not include INVEST.
No. This is straight Denver Public Schools.
And as I understand your support for monitoring seclusion, what do you suggest staff members do if a student is so physically out of control that it is not safe for them to be in the same room as this?
Well, there's very clear policies and guidelines in JKA and JKA-R. If we ever need to restrain a student, we do have qualified professionals that are trained to do so. And so this notion that our students are just these violent criminals, and I've had parents say that, oh, well, we have these 7 feet tall, just football player build sixth graders, and they're throwing teachers across the wall. I can guarantee you Iron Man does not walk in the halls of Denver Public Schools. And so I hope that people that are signing up to be a part of Team DPS understand that sometimes we're going to have difficult days, but we do have qualified professionals that can be able to support us, and making sure that if a student becomes a threat to themselves or others, that we do have policy around restraints and what we can and cannot do when it comes to restraints. Any last minute questions? I will end with this, is that I don't anticipate having any more comments on this matter, at least publicly, with the press or any other press conferences, because the investigation into Mr. Dennis has wrapped up. If there is any other pressing information in my last 89 days on the school board that I believe is pertinent to share with you, I will communicate it. We will have another press conference. We will see each other again, but I really want this to be an opportunity. Mr. Dennis has shared his closure letter. The case is closed into Kurt Dennis. He was fired. He was guilty of what the whistleblowers accused him of, and now it's an opportunity for us as a district to turn the page, move forward, and no longer to allow this situation to loom over our heads. And I will say this last piece to our parents. We have to be able to understand that kids all have a bad day. And I want you to empathize and realize that it could be your student that one day has a very challenging day. And we wouldn't want your student to be locked into a room. And I would hope that we're able to check our implicit biases when we are talking about our students. Our kids are not criminals, they're not thugs, and they're not dangerous humans. They're students, they're kids. Kids are going to be kids, and let's be able to support them in all that we do in Denver Public Schools. Thank you, everyone.